everybody, and welcome to Science and Global Citizenship Education, an exploration of how you can fit global citizenship education into your science curriculum. For the purposes of brevity today, we will focus on the junior cycle curriculum in Ireland. My name is Lizzie Noon. I work for WorldWise Global Schools. I'm an education officer there. And today I'm just going to briefly take you through how we, I suppose, have looked at how global citizenship education can be really explored in science. It's also on the back of a science guide that we have, and I will take you through that today. So, first of all, this is probably old hat for most of you, but just to explain what global citizenship education is. It is an educational process, which means it's not all about knowledge. It is as much about methodologies and skills as it is about the knowledge that you gain. Aimed at increasing awareness and understanding of our rapidly changing and interdependent and unequal world in which we live in. By challenging stereotypes and encouraging independent thinking, global citizenship education helps students critically explore the root causes of global justice issues and how they link with their everyday lives. It is about inspiring solidarity by supporting people to realise their full rights and responsibilities and potential as global citizens in this world. The aims of our programme, which is fully funded by Irish Aid, which is a section of our Department of Foreign Affairs, is really to engage students with their head and their heart and their hands. So meaning getting that critical thinking going, also tapping in with values and attitudes, and most of how that leads to action on these important global issues. We work primarily with teachers to build their capacity and build a community of practice where they can share ideas. So we run a huge program of training throughout the year, as well as kind of individual support that we give to our teachers. We also have small grant funding for every school. We encourage a whole school approach to global citizenship education. And in fact, I'll talk a little bit later now about our Global Passport Award, which is a self-assessed award which we give to schools who, I suppose, in kind of 6 different areas have excelled in their global citizenship education. The main skill that we would promote, obviously, is critical thinking. So as you can see already, global citizenship education is very much aligned to what we are trying to achieve in education in general. I guess if we're looking at kind of the thematic areas that you would naturally explore within global citizenship education, that would include things like fast fashion, trade justice, debt and tax justice, resource extraction, peace and justice, modern day slavery. So even though they mightn't seem kind of the obvious type of thematic areas that you would explore in science, as you know, it's all connected. And there's different ways, and I will go through some of those ways in which you can explore some of these issues within your science curriculum this morning. As I mentioned, it isn't all about knowledge gains. So we would say the components of global citizenship education would be not only kind of knowledge, but like, you know, looking at kind of values and attitudes and opinion forming. The main skills really would be of critical thinking, obviously, but along the way and along the journeys that our schools have gone through, it's amazing the amount of skills that they have gained through, like, you know, for example, raising awareness or taking action. Ultimately, we are looking at building the capacity of teachers and students to take action towards a more kind of positive, equal world. We have many guidelines. One of them I mentioned already, the science guideline, but we also have a generic planning guide for how you can plan around global citizenship education in your school, going from looking at what target group, what year group you're working with, what it could be with teachers or could be with school management. And then choosing a global justice theme, either of your choice or the student's choice, exploring that theme, and the students raising awareness and taking that further and validating their learning by going to other students as well, on how they go about this. Obviously, through that, creating meaningful change and how they go about doing that. Who can they influence in power in order to make the changes that they want to see in the world? Obviously, reflection and reporting is important too, and we've many tools that we can offer in that direction. So that's it. As I said, we have a huge amount of resources available as Béarla agus as Gaeilge that we use to support the schools. Most of our resources for subject areas are targeted towards the junior cycle, but we also have a senior cycle English guide there. So just, I suppose, in general, if we look at the curriculum, both at junior cycle and at senior cycle, but if we look at the skills that we're hoping to build in the students, if we look at, for instance, in the junior cycle, the statements of learning, and there is, in particular, the 6 statements of learning that would definitely come to mind when we think of global citizenship education are 5 to 10. Those of moral decision making, and you'll see there even down to 10 of living sustainably. So already within the curriculum, global citizenship education and what we would consider global citizenship education are there. Again, the key skills. All of these skills are where global citizenship education can really enhance the teaching and learning that takes place within the school. But let's get down to the science part, which is why we're all here today. And if we look particularly at the curriculum that has been with us for the last 3 years now, three or 4 years, we have this great element within our science subjects, but also, as you know, within home ec and geography and construction studies and many other subjects. And there's no doubt that the reform of the senior cycle will see the same element of sustainability being very strong across subject areas. So this is where I think it has, I suppose, the most obvious home of global citizenship education, but there is kind of others. And today I'm just going to go through, I suppose, a few pointers, a few ideas in which you can really make your science class a global citizenship education class too. So if you look there, this is just actually from our guide. And if you look at like if we're looking at the strands 2, say, of Earth and space, again, not the most obvious one, but looking at the strand element of sustainability. If we look at that, if we look at illustrating how Earth processes and human factors influence the Earth's climate, and evaluate effects of climate change and initiatives that attempt to address those effects. So within this particular, so we have it laid out so that it gives, like, you know, both context and then some ideas in which you, and activities in which you can work with your students on. So this one is particularly about climate change. So again, probably the most obvious when it comes to exploring these issues, because climate change is obviously one of the biggest, I suppose, global education themes that we look at. But then again, like, you know, the way looking at a different strand and looking at it from the element of energy, it's like we again connected with climate change, but also we have to look at, like, you know, our kind of planetary boundaries as regards this. But researching different energy sources and formulating and communicating an informed view of ways that current and future energies needs on Earth can be met. So this is looking all at your renewables. It would be, again, like, you know, quite an exciting CBA one if it was to be, like, you know, the way a proper investigation possibly, but also equally could be CBA 2 with science and in society. So again, when we look at strand 4 then, as regards the physical world, if we look at our systems and our interactions and that particular strand element, why can't we look and research and discuss the technological application of physics in terms of scientific, societal and environmental impact? So again, looking at it from a physics point of view, but looking at not only does this, I suppose, bring in like those global themes, but it also gives a relevance to the students on what in real life is going to, what our lives are going to look like. At this stage, I suppose I should mention the Sustainable Development Goals. So within each of our guides, we would look at the Sustainable Development Goals. So how can we look at what's in the Sustainable Development Goals, which we need to reach by 2030, but they will need, like, you know, a lot of solutions, a lot of imagination, a lot of looking how we do things differently in order to sustain ourselves in this world. Again, another kind of example from the physical world would be like students would be able to research and discuss ethical and sustainability issues that arise from our generation and the consumption of electricity. So again, kind of a deep look at our relationship with electricity as well. Even, I suppose, there's some great toolkits out there as well on, like, you know, how to make your own solar panel from scratch and how to make your own wind turbine from scratch as well on a mini scale. And these would be really, really amazing projects. We have a really Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland have some great resources and some great workshops that can really, really help you with this particular strand as well. So then, obviously, when it comes to the biological world, it is like looking again at systems and interactions, but looking at our ecological system. And part of their learning outcome 5 is obviously to conduct a habitat study and research and investigate the adaptation, the competition, and the interdependence of organisms with specific habitats and communities. A really good, well, in fact, the next edition of the New Internationalist, which is well recommended, and I'll provide some links after this, but they have a special edition for January and February on biodiversity, which goes from kind of the scientific research, but also, like, you know, the way it puts it very much as a global issue. How that impacts people as well is something that should be considered when exploring this particular outcome. So again, evaluate how our outcome 10 would evaluate how humans can successfully conserve ecological biodiversity and contribute to our global food production. Again, those, like, you know, our action verbs, they're appreciating the benefits that people obtain from ecosystems as well. There's a huge amount of research that's been done in this area as regards ecological economics. So also considering the other factors and the environmental factors around this as well, possibly looking to do some cross-curricular work with our with business studies and with economics. Would be a really, really interesting project for a school to take on. Again, there's no shortage of resources, not only our resource that we have provided here, but also other organisations. And again, all of this will be put in a link that I'll send in follow-up, and I have at the end of my presentation. Okay. I am going to spend a little bit of time, I suppose, just giving you an example of one of the activities that we kind of advocate within the resource, but also, as I said, I'll send you all the materials on this particular one. But if we look at, say, the chemical world, and again, looking at the strand element of sustainability, learning outcome 10, to evaluate how humans contribute to sustainability through the extraction, use, disposal, and recycling of materials. Again, if we look at, like, I suppose, what's relevant to the people that we're teaching and the students that we're teaching, 12 to 15-year-old, I suppose, they'd still kind of have a very much a consumer view of the world. So why not look at some of the products that are very common to us? This was actually something that we did, a workshop that we did when we've been working with the JCT STEAM initiative on their elective trainings over the last couple of years. So being able to cover things, looking at life cycles of products, but also things as diverse as looking at life expectancy, for instance, as well. So again, all of that is available for you to use in your classroom. But again, so how do we look at this life cycle as well? So as you know, this is something you need to do anyway. But just, I suppose, a good activity that we would recommend is looking at that life cycle of the different stages of products. But why not consider, like, the materials needed, the scientific processes needed at every stage, but also the human rights considerations at every stage, the environmental considerations at each stage as well. So we have a couple here, and I'll just show you, like, the life cycle of a mobile phone. So say if you're looking at the life cycle of a mobile phone, you know, consider where the minerals come from. So say for minerals like cobalt, for instance, which is, and coltan, which is mined in the Central African Republic. That industry is very, very unregulated. I suppose the profits made, or the money that's actually given to the country that mines it itself isn't very much. So looking at kind of those kind of processes, is that fair? Just a note again, just while I think of it, there was actually a student who did in one of the schools that we work with, and she did her CBA on conflict minerals, but she was able to cover use the same topic in her CBA in science and in geography and in English, but she took kind of different angles. It's such a huge area of extraction, and it's something we probably need to, if we are truly to be sustainable, is to kind of cut back on that, but also consider the people that are involved in each process. So as you know, mobile phone industries are huge profit-making business. So, but how does that translate all the way back to the point of extraction? So the other consideration would be our disposal of electronic goods. Like, so where does that go? How can we even think of solutions where our products are more circular, that they're being reused and reused again to kind of slow down on our extraction of minerals. So say the plastic fork is kind of an obvious one. And obviously plastics have really come to the fore of the way like, I think students get it. We all get it now about our use of plastic needs to stop. Probably not, it's rode back a little bit, I guess, in these times. Being everything needs to be disposable for our health and safety as regards COVID. But we need to look at those challenges too, and how we get around them as well. But again, the way looking at the use of oil and the use of energy in order to make the plastic spoons, but then the considerations around, again, disposal, where does that go? So even looking as far as ocean acidification, so looking at those giant islands that are made of our rubbish, and the impact, and the investigating the impact of our water quality on that. So that actually, again, could be a really good CBA which your students can focus on, but also something that you can really investigate within the class. Again, likewise with the coffee cup, it's also probably good to consider the alternatives that have come out. And I know my friend Philip Smith up there in UCD and RTE probably know him. I know he has a compostable cup in his lab, which he's had there for 5 years, and it hasn't actually really moved or changed state. So we do need to consider the alternatives that are offered, compostable when, and maybe we need to kind of consider and put in our students' head about well, maybe we don't use it, and we don't use anything disposable, and can we get to that point where we're not doing that? So anyway, something for your own reflection: what parts of the life cycle could we do better to ensure well-being of people and planet? Considering environmental, social, ecological, and economic sustainability. So I think it's important, and we have a little workshop on this as well, to get to really, really define sustainability for the students properly, because I suppose it's a word that's used very, very loosely now. So again, we'll provide that in our little pack afterwards. It's really important, and I think this data is really vital, I think, for us to look at just we're overusing resources basically, and that has a huge impact on our people and our planet, and it can be one of the cruxes and one of the kind of root causes of poverty and injustice in the world. Right now, Ireland is at April 26th in our overshoot day, which means that we're overshooting by we're overshooting the amount of resources we use by 8 months. So we really, to be truly sustainable, we're using guess 4 times the amount of resources that we should be using, and that would include energy and material use, and so everything that we use as a country per capita. Another huge consideration, which is the Stockholm Resilience Centre has come up with a really, really good model. So instead of looking just solely at climate change, we need to look at our planetary boundaries. 4 out of the 9 here have been crossed as a result of human activity. So maybe asking the students to name them or guess which ones that they are. There's a huge amount in this, as you can see, as regards biology, as regards chemistry, and as regards physics, and possibly astrophysics. So if we look there on our genetic diversity, obviously, so our species, our extinction of species. If we look obviously at our biogeochemical flows as well, we're not doing great. Our land system change, and again, climate change is moving up there itself. Try to fill in this as much as I can, but again, climate change at the top, it's too high. Our species biodiversity loss, too high, 10 species per million per year is not really where we should be going. Ocean acidification, it's nearing too high. Our land use change, 25% conservation of forested lands is what that's again too high. We need more forested land in order for our carbon sinks to exist themselves. Again, nitrogen and phosphorus loading too high. Fresh water use, not on the danger zone quite yet, but it's not finite, and certainly not everybody has access to clean drinking water. So that's another consideration. Many organisations have done quite a lot actually to I suppose explore plans. So there exists already some really good resources on planetary boundaries. So we'll just look now, particularly at CBAs, and within our science guide that we have, we do look at we do give you some ideas for CBAs. And first of all, I suppose the CBA one, and I've mentioned some of them already, experimental investigation. And we would suggest that you look at the societal challenges of Europe mentioned in the EU Horizon 2020 programme. So just considering food security, considering bioeconomy, considering all these things. So there's lots of areas there in which your students can do a really, really good experimental investigation on. And that could be, if you see actually some really, really good examples come from the BT Young Scientist exhibition itself. Last year, there was 60% of all the projects were based around sustainability. So we've plenty there. One of the schools that we work with was even doing it from a societal point of view, just investigating attitudes. They did some really, really good primary research here. Why not kind of double up sometimes on your CVA, your project for BT, but also really good kind of things to engage with, like the Young Environmentalist Award run by Eco-UNESCO. For the CBA 2, Science in Society, I suppose we have so much, I suppose, to look at here. And looking at our current context, even looking at COVID vaccine, the equal distribution of that, the way how, I suppose, the access to medicines around that is really, and looking at other factors like trade and patents, for example. At the moment, if you keep an eye on this is pre-Christmas, excuse me, but if you keep an eye on WTO negotiations at the moment as regards maybe lifting some of the patents for generic distribution of medicines and vaccines, and considering kind of other factors within that and other barriers maybe to people having access to things like medicine and healthcare. Obviously, a really good kind of way would be to looking at science influence on our SDGs, so our Sustainable Development Goals, and taking each one of those and having a look. Science has provided a really powerful narrative for us to tackle things like climate change and ecological breakdown. I really don't believe without science and the scientific vigor around the research that we would be in I suppose, a society that's actually talking about climate change. I'm not sure about the action part quite yet, but we're definitely You know, there's huge awareness around it. The governments are striving to do something about it. But just to really, really appreciate how much science has brought us, you know, to something that's affecting everyone, a huge global issue that's affecting us all. Just, I suppose, to mention as well, we are involved with a Science for Development Award, and it's a really fantastic award, which awards students who have really, I suppose, pushed kind of global justice at the heart of their projects, and have really kind of considered this. So just be careful, I suppose, of the criteria as well. We don't want, I suppose, you know, we can offer solutions maybe to poverty, but we also have to look at it, like, you know, very holistically, as in what can we, like, you know, do to be more sustainable here and all around the world. So I suppose we've lots of examples of how, like, say, their North Monastery Secondary School looked at an economical sensor that leads to the conservation of water using sound frequency. So again, like, you know, the way looking at things, like, you know, the way limited access to water, say, so what are the kind of solutions maybe to that? Looking at, like, you know, agriculture, there's been so many really, really good agricultural projects as well, which will look at, you know, for instance, if there's an area where there's very little water, what kind of things can we do to purify water, say? So yeah, lots of, but I suppose, like, you know, really, really demonstrating an understanding of the connections as well between local and global development projects as well. Great. So just, I suppose, not just to finish off, not to forget, like, you know, the way that there's so much potential in global citizenship education to do cross-curricular work. So we're just looking at, say, the geography curriculum there. Again, like, you know, the way, where's the overlaps? Where's the potential to do, like, possible projects? Also to consider that although we have, like, guides for geography and for home economics and for science, it's not to say that there isn't bits of, say, the home economics guide or the geography guide that you could actually use in your classroom as well. Again, looking at home economics here and looking at sustainable and responsible living. This is just, I suppose, a snapshot where we particularly look at the impact of food choices from ecological and ethical perspective. Again, something that you could use in conjunction with your biology strand. Again, we're not the only they're not the only kid in town who would have, you know, some really, really good resources for you there. There's an Oxfam resource there, Science and Global Citizenship Education. Real World Learning has lots on the planetary boundaries that I spoke of earlier. We have Development Perspectives, have really good sustainable development education, development goals, information packs on each of the sustainable development goals. I suppose this was taken from one of the recent protests around climate change and Fridays for Future. Let us now pause for a moment of science. So just, I suppose, to acknowledge that, like, you know, all of this learning that takes place as well, to encourage kind of action as well. And whether that's, you know, going with the placard or having a chat with your TD or involving yourself in other campaigns, it's important, I suppose, that students have somewhere to go with you know, with this as well. Just, I suppose, a few examples of where other schools have taken their global citizenship education within their science class. Again, so Aideen would have looked at the water cycle and carbon cycle, making posters of the life cycle again of food and giving advice on how we could be more sustainable at each stage. So Again, Jenny Murray in Ballyhaunis, she would have, like, you know, they were really taken sustainability as a major theme, looking at the carbon cycle, looking at fuel consumption. She did an interesting jigsaw activity that looked at the cause and effect of irresponsibility with energy resources, for example. Just to let you know, I suppose WorldWise Global Schools are here to support teachers in global citizenship education. So I leave my details at the very end of this, and please feel free to there's 4 of us education officers that would be absolutely delighted to help, and whether that's with possibly doing a science workshop with your other teachers. We also have a science workshop coming up on the 21st of January, which is kind of an extended version of what we've just done here. Just to note, we have a website that's full of resources, and we have a huge resource library there. You'll see there we have a link to training and events. We also have organised it in the Sustainable Development Goals, so you can go into the Sustainable Development Goals and find global justice themes within them. I mentioned earlier on that we have a global passport, which is a framework, but also an award in which schools can apply for within every area of the school, looking at it from a curricular point of view, but also looking at it from an extracurricular point of view, looking at kind of field trips, looking at your extracurricular groups, looking at awareness raising events, for example. Teacher capacity as well, how much capacity is within the staff as well to roll out global citizenship education, how much of the student voice and how student led are the projects that you do as regards global citizenship education, school leadership and policies. So how can you influence policy to make sure that you're a global citizenship education school? And again, kind of going out to the wider community with your global citizenship education. Just a couple of upcoming dates. As I mentioned, we're having subject-specific training coming up in January, February and March. We also have a national teacher training where it's working as community of GCE practice, giving teachers an opportunity to really share their learning on this as well. And I mentioned the Global Passport there. We have webinars that will take you through the process on January the 18th and February the 22nd. So that's it. We will have a chance for questions now, I believe, but everything you need and everything we spoke about here and all the resources are